So listen to this. I'm sick of people attempting to discredit Mo Salah because he never won the African Cup of Nations. I don't mind if you disregard the fact that he has more Premier League goals than Drogba, more UCL goals than Eto'o, and has already outscored George Weah overall. But to portray him as if his international career has been disappointing is simply rude. It's as if everyone has forgotten about his history. Salah, with or without an African Cup of Nations to his name, has done more for his people than perhaps any other player on that list after all. Many people fail to see that this was never a fair comparison because Mo Salah's journey began on the same day that Egyptian football died. The day Egyptian football died. It was February 1st, 2012. Almost a year had passed since the military overthrew dictator Hosni Mubarak's regime. And while many were led to believe the Arab Spring was winding down, the revolution was still very much alive among the Al Ahly ultras. At the height of the protest in Tahrir Square, those same ultras, dubbed hooligans at times, were the ones who stepped in and sheltered protesters from police abuse. Regardless, nearly 800 lives had been lost by the end of the riots. When the military took over, the ultras didn't seem to see any difference between themselves and the armed forces they had imagined in recent weeks. They were direct enemies before you realized it, and thus, on that infamous day when everyone knew the tension between Al-Masri and Al Ahly fans would be at an all-time high, the police had no desire to defend them. So when the home fans flooded the pitch after a historic 3-1 comeback, little was done to contain them, and in the blink of an eye, they were charging towards their opponents looking for blood. While the police took some steps to safeguard the players and personnel, they scarcely looked at the away fans who, in an attempt to flee the attacks, ended up rushing towards the single gate available, only to find that no one had even opened it. Some were attacked, others fell off the stands, and the majority were trampled and crushed. By the end, 74 people had died and over 500 had been injured. That day, Bill Shankly's famous phrase struck a chord with Egyptian football fans more than ever. Football isn't about life and death. I can guarantee you that it is far more significant than that. The league was canceled 1 month later. Another full league season would not take place for another 2 years. Another 4 minutes passed before the fans were let back into the stands. As a result, the majority of the league's top players fled the country, and several, notably Abawarika, who was widely regarded as the country's greatest player at the time, announced their retirement. Above all, the fans were concerned about the national team. After becoming the first nation in history to win 3 consecutive AFCON titles, Nigeria now has a total of 7. By 2010, Egypt had established itself as the most powerful football nation in Africa. But when they set their sights on qualifying for the World Cup for the first time in 24 years, calamity struck. Instability reigned supreme, and by the end of 2011, they had failed to qualify for the African Cup of Nations for the first time since 1978. They needed someone to keep that light blazing as they reached the darkest period of their history. In a world without a football, the youngsters needed someone to look up to. But no one could have predicted that the hero they sought was playing for Mokawloon, who had ended at the bottom of the table the previous year. Though they didn't realize at the time, that man was Egypt's next king. Mohamed Salah was the man in question. He had only joined the club 5 years earlier at the age of 14 and had previously played academy football. The Wonderkid from nowhere for only a year. Before that, all of his experience had come from playing on the streets of futsal, and his former team had only discovered him by coincidence after sending a scout to look at another kid. Regardless, when Mokawloon discovered him, Salah clung to his one chance as tightly as he could, not even the fact that he lived 4 hours away from their training grounds deterring him. He dropped out of school and accepted that until he made it, his time would be spent training, getting to training, returning from training, or sleeping. It wasn't easy. I suffered a lot, he told the ESPN. But happily, he wouldn't have to bear that agony for much longer. He had always played as a left back up until that point, but when one of the academy coaches moved him up front, he had transformed into the most promising player at the academy, even getting his own personal room at their facilities so he wouldn't have to spend so much time traveling. And that wasn't even the most stunning part. Little more than a year after arriving, he not only joined the first team for training, but he also made his debut, becoming the Egyptian League's youngest player ever. He became a regular less than 2 years later and the club's star a little more than a year later. By February of that year, Salah had scored 7 goals and helped 3 others in just 15 matches, had been called up to the national team twice, and Zamalek, one of the country's largest teams, was already seeking to recruit him. But then, well, you know what happened. The miracle that saved Salah's career. With his entire life disintegrating around him over the following 6 months, the only thing Salah could hang onto was his call-up to the Olympic Games. So he joined the team in preparation and prayed for the best. And then it happened. With virtually every player lacking meaningful game time, they scheduled a friendly against FC Basel, and though Salah would start on the bench with the game tied, they brought him in for the second half, and as Basel's president put it, "I'll never forget what I saw on that pitch that day. It was incredible, even in the frigid cold. I'd never seen such a quick player before." Salah had scored twice at the end, and the Egyptian under-23s had won against the odds. Knowing the situation in Egypt, that same president asked Salah to stay in the city for a week, and Salah signed with Basel less than a month later. They understood they couldn't afford to waste such a genius. Salah knew he couldn't pass up this opportunity, as he stated, "I wanted to be the best I could be so that when I arrived at Basel, they would all know they were getting a good player, not some unknown from Egypt." So he made the most of every opportunity to play before heading to Switzerland, scoring in every Olympic group stage match, including one against Neymar's Brazil, and then adding a 93rd-minute winner in the World Cup qualifiers to round out a summer that convinced everyone in Switzerland that Basel had struck gold. In fact, Salah could not have made Shaqiri's departure any more inconsequential, and no one could have predicted how difficult it was for him to adjust to life in Switzerland. Despite the cold, not knowing a word of language, and feeling completely isolated, Salah ran riot on the pitch, accumulating 21 goal contributions in just 2,700 minutes of football and impressing the most in the Europa League, where he led Basel to their best season in their history, totaling 5 assists, the most in the competition, and ensuring that his 2 goals came against the 2 toughest opponents they faced. First against Tottenham to force a penalty shootout, and then against Chelsea in the semi-finals at Stamford Bridge, although Basel would fall one step shy of the final anyway. Still, with a league title to his name, Salah charged into the following season's World Cup qualifications, hammering 3 past Zimbabwe and scoring the game-winning goal against Mozambique to put Egypt 1 win away from the World Cup playoffs. The fall and rise of the Egyptian Messi. Then they returned to Switzerland and scored 3 goals in 4 Champions League playoff matches to secure their place in the competition in what I can only assume was a warm-up. Then, against Guinea, he delivered the knockout strike that not only put Egypt in the playoffs, but also made Salah the qualifier's top scorer. Regardless, just as he was on the verge of restoring joy to his people, Ghana thrashed them 6-1 in the first leg, and all hope was lost. And with the Egyptian league still suspended, the last thing fans could hope for was Salah. But thankfully for them, over the next 6 months, he not only improved his league performances, but he also met Chelsea in the Champions League twice and scored on both occasions, making it 3-3 against the Blues and putting every Premier League club on his tail during the winter transfer market, coming within inches of joining Liverpool, only for one phone call from Jose Mourinho to change his mind completely. But while Chelsea was the more dominant team at the time, they also possessed Hazard, Lukaku, Oscar, Ramirez, Willian, Torres, Eto'o, and Schürrle, and Mourinho was infamous for hardly changing his starting XI. Salah would later confess, "Looking back, I was given the wrong advice." By the end of his debut season, he had only received 500 minutes of playing time. It appeared that his career had plateaued, and it only got worse the next season. In October, after only beating Shrewsbury Town courtesy of an own goal, Mourinho personally chastised Salah, alleging he had been let down. A month later, Egypt failed to qualify for yet another African Cup of Nations, and by January, Salah had only made 3 Premier League outings, as he himself stated. "My dream was slipping away, and I didn't want to be a victim. I had 2 options: to accept they were right for putting me on the bench or to prove them wrong, so I felt like, no, I need to go." By the following month, Salah had joined Fiorentina on loan, and to remind himself why he was playing, he wore the number 74 on his back and honor off the 74 victims of the port-said disaster. All he wanted was to make his people happy, and after 6 matches, he was already on 5 goals. By the end of the season, he had proven his worth with goals against Juventus, Inter, and Tottenham, and Fiorentina had not only achieved their best league result in 15 years. However, they had reached the Europa League semi-finals, their most successful European run since the Baggio period. They did not hesitate to renew his loan when the time came. According to their president, "We made him an insane offer." Yet Salah turned it down, shattering their hearts. They even attempted to register a complaint with FIFA to keep their top player. But it was too late. Salah had already left for Rome, and he was fantastic there. After injuring his right ankle 3 months into this new chapter, it wouldn't have been unreasonable to expect his momentum to be interrupted once more. But after 8 games without a goal, Salah took a quantum leap to a whole other level, with 10 goals and 6 assists in 18 matches before the season's end, ensuring Roma remained unbeaten for 5 months. Taking them from 6 points off a Champions League spot to 13 points ahead of 4th-place Inter Milan, they were not only awarded the club's Player of the Season, but also their highest scorer. I'll never understand how Chelsea accepted a signing offer of barely 15 million euros. But what I do know is that Salah then managed to get Egypt back into the African Cup of Nations, scoring 4 goals in 4 games, and he was instantly a household name. With 1,000 minutes of game time under his belt, he had already contributed 13 goals. And then once again, an injury put a stop to his progress. When he returned, the moment he had been anticipating arrived. It was time to travel to Egypt for the Africa Cup of Nations. After a goalless first encounter, Salah assisted the only goal of the match against Uganda, then scored the only goal against Ghana to go to the knockout stages. After a close victory over Morocco, Salah scored the only goal in the semi-final. But although he assisted the winner in the final, the Egyptian defense crumbled with 2 minutes remaining and Abubakar scored to flip the game around. Salah was devastated. Even winning his first African Player of the Year award did not satisfy him. But, as usual, he didn't wallow in his own agony. Instead, he held his head high and continued going. He had 34 goal contributions in 3,100 minutes of play by the end of the season, had guided Roma to their most points total in history, had been named Player of the Season, but most crucial, it was time to return to the Premier League and show them what they had been missing. How Salah forever changed Egypt. And after spending a club record 42 million euros, Liverpool finally secured the player they had been looking for years. And no matter how many supporters insisted, he was nothing more than a Chelsea flop. A reject thought he was doomed to fail, and that they'd be better off signing Aaron Lennon. Klopp believed in him, and 2 months later, he had already scored 6 goals and assisted another. But before he could double up, the biggest game of his career arrived. It was the game of the World Cup qualifying stages, Egypt versus Congo. Egypt would be in the World Cup for the first time in 28 years if they won, and all the burden would be placed on Salah's shoulders. He couldn't move, and it happened after less than an hour of gameplay. Salah had set a goal, but as the clock approached 90 minutes, Congo tied the game. In Salah's words, "I couldn't believe what I witnessed. I just couldn't accept the fact that we wouldn't qualify. I was completely crushed and fell to the ground, but as soon as I struck the ground, I realized that my teammates couldn't see me that way, so I dragged myself back up. But I was burning on the inside. That was certainly the most difficult time of my life." A player fell in the area 3 minutes into injury time, and the referee pointed to the penalty spot as the crowd roared as the majority of the Egyptian crew ran onto the pitch, and the announcer thanked God for that time. One man remained motionless. Mo Salah was tasked with making that miracle a reality, and then he did. The prophecy had come true. Egypt was back in the World Cup. In Salah's words, "It was a fantastic moment for everyone, but to qualify in such fashion." Even the finest authors in the world would struggle to come up with an ending like that. But Salah was mistaken. That was not the end. Salah went on to have one of the best seasons in Premier League history, fueled by that moment. His 32 goals not only earned him the Golden Boot, but also broke the league's all-time goal-scoring record. When the trophies were given out, he accepted every single one available, from the FWA to the PFA, the FSF, the Premier League itself, and even the fans, who awarded him Player of the Year. It was only the second time in history that this had occurred, but none of that took into account his Champions League campaign. 10 goals and 4 assists in under 900 minutes until the final. No African or Liverpool player had ever reached double figures in the competition. Salah had scored against every club he faced, and no opponent had escaped unscathed. But as Liverpool reached their first final in 11 years and Salah came within inches of capping off one of the greatest seasons in history, Ramos nearly broke his arm 30 minutes into the final and Salah was carried out in tears. Liverpool lost without him and finished the season without a single trophy. And to make matters worse, it was stated that Salah might not be able to heal in time for the World Cup. The cries could be heard all around Egypt. Ramos was dubbed public enemy number 1 by one newspaper, and its people would never forgive him by another. A lawyer even attempted to sue him for $1 billion, citing physical and psychological harm to Egypt. Thankfully, Salah made it to the World Cup, even if he had to be rested for the first match, witnessing his team break down under Uruguay and losing the second match despite scoring a penalty. By the time he lobbed the Saudi custodian to open the scoring of the next match, Egypt had already been eliminated from the competition. Nothing mattered. Egypt's first open play goal in a World Cup since 1934. It was the first time in their history that they were ahead of the world's greatest rival. That was all that mattered at the time. Egypt's people were overjoyed because their son had restored hope.